What would you do if you were wrongly accused in public, just because of how you look? That's exactly what happens to Malik, a sharp-dressed black teenager, when a security guard makes a snap judgment at a fancy shopping mall and falsely accuses him of shoplifting. As things heat up and the truth begins to unfold, this moment forces us to stop and think, how often do our assumptions cause us to treat others unfairly? And what happens when those in positions of authority are faced with the reality of their own bias? Before we get into this powerful story, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching or listening from. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more stories like this. The shopping mall in Richmond, Virginia, was buzzing with activity. The sound of footsteps echoed through the wide hallways as people wandered from store to store. Bright displays showed off luxury handbags and stylish clothes, creating quick glimpses of passers-by in the glass. Ethan, the mall's night security guard, stood watch. He had 2 years on the job and knew the place like the back of his hand. But something about tonight felt off, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. His radio crackled to life. "You all good over there?" came the familiar voice of Sarah, his partner for the evening. Ethan adjusted the radio clip to his hip. "Yeah, all clear," he replied. "Same old weekend crowd." As his eyes scanned the floor, he spotted a group of teens hanging around near the entrance of Bon Ami, one of the mall's more upscale shops. There were 4 of them, laughing, chatting, and soaking in the Friday night vibe. Nothing unusual for this time of week. Among them was Malik. He stood out. Dressed in a clean-cut navy jacket, fitted jeans, and sleek sneakers, he looked more put together than the others, who wore hoodies and well-worn shoes. For reasons he couldn't explain, Ethan's gaze locked onto Malik. A flicker of suspicion sparked inside him. He couldn't point to anything specific. It was just a gut feeling. The teens didn't seem to be shopping. Maybe they were up to no good. Or maybe just waiting around. The radio buzzed again. "See something?" Sarah asked. Her tone was neutral, but she could sense Ethan's shift in focus. She had worked with him long enough to know when he was on alert. "Maybe," Ethan said, already walking toward the group. "Just gonna check it out." As Ethan approached, Malik briefly looked up from his phone, then went back to what he was doing, unaware of the scrutiny. Ethan slowed down as he got closer, sizing up the scene. He cleared his throat and spoke, his tone firm. "Hey," he said, motioning with his hand. "What are you all doing here?" One of the boys, wearing a backward cap, gave him a bored look. "Just chilling, man. We're not doing anything wrong." Ethan's focus shifted back to Malik, the one dressed the sharpest. His pulse picked up. "You," he said, pointing directly at Malik. "What are you doing here?" "I've been watching you for a while." Malik raised his eyes, calm but clearly confused. "I'm waiting for my friends," he replied, voice steady. "Why?" Ethan's expression tightened. "Because you don't look like you're waiting for anything," he said. "I want to know if you've been inside that store." He motioned to Bon Ami. His words carried an edge, more accusation than question. Malik blinked, caught off guard. Confusion turned to disbelief. "What? No. I've just been standing here." The laughter around the group died down. The other teens shifted, now tense and silent. Sarah, watching from a distance, felt her stomach twist. She'd seen Ethan do this before, single someone out for no solid reason. But this time felt different. She could see it in Malik's face, fear starting to creep in. The energy in the air shifted. "You think I stole something?" Malik asked. His voice cracked slightly, no longer as steady. He glanced at the store again, trying to understand what was happening. Ethan stepped in closer. "You tell me," he said. "Why don't you go ahead and empty your pockets?" The demand dropped like a bomb. What had been a relaxed Friday night moment now felt heavy and uncomfortable. The other teens stood frozen, eyes darting between Ethan and Malik. Malik straightened up, shoulders squared. "No," he said firmly. "I didn't take anything. I'm not emptying my pockets. I haven't done anything wrong." Ethan's jaw tightened. His voice rose. "Empty your pockets," he ordered again, louder this time, drawing curious looks from nearby shoppers. "What's going on over there?" a woman called out from a distance. Her voice sparked curiosity in the crowd that had started forming. People edged closer, trying to see what was happening. Sarah stood nearby, watching the situation spiral out of control. Her heart was racing. This had gone way too far. She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to intervene. Ethan was on a power trip, and she could see it clear as day. Malik took a steady breath. "Look, man," he said, trying to stay calm. "I'm just here waiting for my friends. I don't want any problems." He reached for his phone, his voice tight with frustration. "But if you keep pushing this, we're gonna have a real issue." Ethan's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, we already have one." Without warning, Ethan lunged forward and grabbed Malik by the arm. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. "I told you to empty your pockets." "Do it, now," Ethan demanded. Malik yanked his arm back, doing his best to hold himself together. "Let go of me," he snapped. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It was sharp and full of emotion that had clearly been building for a long time. "You don't have the right to do this." Ethan gripped Malik's arm tighter, and things quickly got out of hand. Phones went up. People started recording. Murmurs spread through the crowd as more bystanders looked on in disbelief. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest. This was wrong. All of it. She couldn't just stand there anymore. She stepped forward and spoke clearly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Ethan, that's enough." Ethan turned toward her, surprised. "What? You think he's innocent?" he snapped. Sarah swallowed, her face pale but steady. "Yes, I do. And you've gone too far." Ethan hesitated, then released Malik's arm, though his face was burning red with anger and embarrassment. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. Malik straightened his jacket, brushing it off with slow, controlled movements. His voice was calm now, but cold. "You just made a huge mistake." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but Malik didn't give him the chance. This time, he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "You want to know who I am? My name is Malik Dawson." He paused, letting that land. Then he added, "My father owns this mall. And once he hears about this, about what just happened, you'll be out of a job." Ethan's expression collapsed. His eyes went wide, and his hands dropped to his sides like dead weight. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice suddenly small, all his confidence gone. "You heard me," Malik said. "Now go call your manager. I want to speak with them right now." Sarah stepped in, her tone firm and sincere. "I'll call them, Malik. I'm so sorry this happened. I'll make sure it's handled properly." Ethan stood still, speechless. His usual authority had vanished. People in the crowd shook their heads, murmuring to one another, some with disgust on their faces. Malik stared at Ethan for a long moment, then turned to Sarah. "Let's get this straightened out," he said quietly. But his voice still carried the anger of someone who had been pushed too far. Sarah led Malik away. Ethan stayed behind, alone, slowly realizing the weight of what he'd done. He had acted on assumptions, on prejudice, and now he'd have to face the consequences. And the days that followed, mall management launched a full investigation into what had happened. The videos taken by bystanders had spread like wildfire online, showing Ethan's aggression and Malik's calm resistance. The public was furious. People demanded answers. They wanted change. Ethan was suspended while the investigation played out, but the damage had already been done. The video had exposed something much bigger than just one incident. It showed a deeper problem that could no longer be ignored. As for Sarah, she became a key witness in the case. She spoke openly about what she had seen that night. It wasn't easy for her, she had worked with Ethan for years, but she knew staying silent would have been wrong. Eventually, justice was served. Ethan lost his job. The mall responded by launching new training programs for their entire security team. These programs were aimed at ending racial profiling and making sure every customer was treated fairly and with respect. Malik didn't just want Ethan punished, he wanted something positive to come from the experience. And thanks to his voice and persistence, real changes were made. Months later, the mall was quieter. The crowds had thinned. But the memory of what had happened still hung in the air. For Malik, Sarah, and everyone who had witnessed that night, one thing was clear: justice had been done. And it would stand as a powerful reminder to everyone. When decisions are fueled by prejudice, there will be consequences, and the truth always comes to light. That evening, Ethan sat at home on his couch, staring blankly at the TV. The news was playing in the background, but he wasn't really watching, just hoping, maybe foolishly, that the mall incident wouldn't come up again. But of course, it did. Over and over. The latest update on the Richmond Mall incident, the anchor said, where a security guard was caught on camera racially profiling a black teenager. Ethan rubbed his face in frustration, sighing hard. His phone buzzed again. He didn't even bother checking it. He already knew who was calling. His supervisor had tried reaching him 3 times. He'd left voicemails, each one making it painfully clear Ethan's suspension was turning into a permanent dismissal. The mall's leadership couldn't afford the mess this had become. It had grown into a full-blown PR crisis. The video had gone far beyond Richmond. It had hit national news. It was all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, online forums. People were watching, reacting, commenting. And not kindly. Strangers were picking his life apart online. Most didn't even know his name until now, but they were all talking about him. Calling him racist. A disgrace. Some labeled him a threat. Ethan turned off the TV and sat there in silence. The room felt heavy. All he could hear was his own breathing. What had he been thinking? At the time, it had felt like instinct. He told himself he was doing his job. But now, replaying it in his mind over and over, he couldn't avoid the truth. Malik hadn't done anything wrong. And yet, from the moment Ethan saw him, he had treated that young man like a criminal. He knew what was coming next. The investigation was nearly finished. His official termination was probably just days away. And it wasn't just about losing this job. Malik wasn't just any teenager. He had influence. He came from a powerful family. Ethan was just Ethan. A mall security guard. And now, likely one with no career left in security at all, he let out another long sigh and ran his fingers through his hair. His thoughts turned to Sarah. She'd seen the whole thing unfold, she'd watched him do it, and then she'd stood up against him. Maybe she'd been right. Maybe she'd seen it more clearly than he had in the moment. Still, it stung. He couldn't help but feel betrayed. Meanwhile, Malik was sitting across from his father in the family office. The room was impressive, lined with plaques, awards, and framed newspaper articles about his father's business success. Malik had grown up surrounded by wealth and privilege. But that hadn't protected him, not when it really mattered. Not the designer clothes he wore that day. Not the family name. Not even the fact that his father owned the mall. He stared down at his phone, scrolling through an endless stream of messages. Texts. DMs. Notifications. Ever since the video went viral, it had been non-stop. Friends, classmates, people he hadn't heard from in years, they were all reaching out. Some were offering support. Others were confused or angry. Few asked why he hadn't done more. Why didn't you fight back? Why'd you just stand there? Malik put his phone down and tossed it aside. They didn't get IT'd. IT wasn't that easy. He'd stayed calm on purpose. He didn't want to escalate things. But even though he did everything he could to keep things from getting worse, the humiliation still lingered. He could still feel Ethan's hand grabbing his arm. Still remember how it felt to have strangers stare at him, judge him, before they even knew what was really going on. His father walked into the room just then. As always, his presence filled the space. "Malik, we need to talk," he said, his voice serious. Malik sat up a little straighter, knowing his father had been busy all day, meeting with the mall's leadership team, working to control the damage. His father was a man who cared deeply about reputation. And now, their family name was at the center of an unwanted spotlight. "I just got off a call with the board," his father said, sitting down across from him. "They're treating this matter very seriously." He paused before continuing. "The security guard, Ethan, he's going to be fired. And they're going to review all of their security procedures moving forward." Malik gave a slow nod. But he wasn't sure how to feel. "Good," he said. "But this isn't just about firing him, Dad. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to someone else. Ever again." His father's expression softened for a moment. "I know," he said. "And we're working on that." He leaned forward slightly. "But Malik, I want you to understand, these kinds of situations can be intense. People get overwhelmed. They react poorly. They make mistakes. Sometimes, really big ones." Malik frowned and met his father's gaze. No, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a decision. A choice. There was a long pause. His father didn't look away. Finally, he gave a small nod. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "It was a choice. And that's exactly why we're not brushing this under the rug." The room went still, the weight of that truth hanging heavy between them. Malik could tell. His father was trying to handle this like a business matter. He was used to fixing problems, managing crises. But for Malik, this wasn't just a headline or a reputation issue. This was personal. IT wasn't just about headlines anymore. For Malik, it had become personal. "I want to be part of the changes," he said suddenly. Even he was caught off guard by the strength in his own voice. His father raised an eyebrow. "Part of it, how?" Malik paused, thinking it through. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted. "But I don't want this to be just talk. I want to make sure whatever new rules or policies they come up with actually mean something. That they actually stop this from happening again, not just to me, but to anyone." His father looked at him for a moment, taking in the seriousness on his son's face. Then he gave a nod. "All right. We can make that happen." The next day, Sarah sat alone in the security office, staring at her own reflection in the black screen of the computer. The investigation had wrapped up, but her thoughts were far from settled. She kept replaying everything in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that she should have stepped in sooner, should have done more. She had hesitated. Let Ethan take the lead for too long before finally speaking up. Now, after everything that had happened, she couldn't help wondering if maybe she could have stopped it before it got so out of hand. When she first started working as a security guard, it wasn't about power or authority. She genuinely wanted to help people, to keep them safe. But over time, the job became routine. It was easy to go on autopilot, to let unconscious biases influence decisions without even realizing it. She sighed quietly and looked over at the empty desk where Ethan used to sit. He hadn't come back to the mall since the day of the incident. From what she'd heard, he wasn't coming back at all. She didn't feel sorry about that. What Ethan did was wrong. That part was clear. But still, it weighed heavily on her. How fast everything had escalated. How easy it had been to lose control of the situation. Soft knock at the door snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned and saw Malik standing there, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. He looked calm, but there was something in his face, something more serious than the last time she'd seen him. "Hey," he said as he stepped inside. "You got a minute?" Sarah nodded. "Yeah. Come on in." He sat down across from her. For a few seconds, neither of them said a word. It was the first time they'd spoken since it all happened. She had been expecting him to be upset, maybe angry. But Malik didn't seem mad. He just looked tired. "I just wanted to say thanks," he said finally. "For stepping up. For saying something. I know that couldn't have been easy." Sarah shook her head. "No, it wasn't. But it was the right thing to do. And I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner." Malik nodded slowly, his eyes on the floor for a moment. "It's wild how fast things can fall apart," he said quietly. "I never thought something like that could happen to me. But now it's like, I don't know. I see things differently." Sarah understood. She had started seeing things differently too. The whole situation had opened her eyes to how subtle bias can be, how it can creep into decisions, without anyone realizing it. "I think a lot of people are seeing things differently now," she said softly. "And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that means something will actually change." Malik gave her a faint smile. "Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for." The days after the incident turned into weeks. Life didn't go back to normal for Malik. Not completely. He kept things low-key. Tried to stay out of the spotlight. But the video of what happened with Ethan was still making the rounds. There were news segments, interview requests, messages from advocacy groups. His father did what he could to shield him from all of it, but at school, it wasn't easy. Some students treated him differently. A few saw him as brave for standing up against injustice. Others looked at him with pity, like they thought he was damaged by the experience. Malik wasn't sure how to feel about any of it. On one hand, he was glad the incident had sparked bigger conversations, about race, about profiling, about fairness. But on the other hand, he just wanted to move forward, to go back to his life. Still, deep down, he knew things would never fully go back to how they were. Not really. One quiet afternoon, Malik sat at a cafe with his best friend Ryan. There weren't many people around. A few customers were scattered at tables, sipping coffee and chatting softly. Ryan had been his closest friend for years. And through everything, he'd stayed by Malik's side. He stirred his drink slowly before speaking. "Man, it's crazy how this all blew up," he said. "Like, one minute we're just hanging out at the mall and the next," his voice faded as he looked at Malik, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Yeah," Malik said quietly, staring out the window. "It's still hard to believe it actually happened. I never thought something like that would happen to me." Ryan gave a small nod. "Nobody ever does. But you handled it better than most would have. I still don't know how you stayed so calm." Malik shrugged. "Honestly, I don't really know either. I just knew that if I lost my cool, things could have gotten a whole lot worse. Especially with Ethan. He wasn't exactly open to hearing anything." Ryan's face darkened a bit. He was just waiting for an excuse to start something. "We all saw that." Malik let out a breath. "Yeah, but at least something positive is coming out of it. My dad's been having talks with the mall's management. They're working on real changes, new training, new rules, things that might actually help." "That's awesome," Ryan said, sitting up straighter. "Maybe it'll stop stuff like that from happening to other people." "Maybe." Malik nodded, but his voice carried a touch of uncertainty. "I want to believe that. I really do. But you and I both know change doesn't happen overnight. These deep-rooted issues, they don't just vanish." Ryan leaned forward, watching him closely. "You ever think about what you want to do next? I mean, after all this?" Malik gave a small smile, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "Funny you ask. I've been thinking about getting more involved, not just with what's going on at the mall, but beyond that. Maybe doing work with the community. Visiting schools. Talking to young people about what happened." Ryan's eyes widened a bit. "That's huge, man. You'd be great at that." Malik chuckled softly. "I don't know about great, but I feel like I have to do something. After everything that's happened, I can't just go back to pretending like it didn't. People need to hear these stories. They need to understand." Ryan nodded slowly, and for a little while, neither of them spoke. They just sat in that quiet moment, the weight of everything they'd talked about settling around them. Malik didn't know exactly what the future looked like. But one thing was certain, there was no going back to how things used to be. Back at the mall, change was already happening. Ethan had officially been let go. The mall had rolled out a new set of diversity and bias training sessions for all its employees. And this time, it wasn't just a PR move. Management had brought in outside experts, people who actually knew how to reshape systems and challenge the old ways of thinking. What happened to Malik had been a serious wake-up call. And ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. Sarah had attended one of the first sessions. She sat in the back, quiet, as the instructor talked about unconscious bias and how it affects decisions, even when people think they're being fair. Some of the examples were tough to hear. They hit close to home. But Sarah knew it was something she needed to sit with. She couldn't pretend she wasn't part of the issue. No, she hadn't acted like Ethan, but she'd waited too long to step in. And that delay, it almost cost someone their dignity. After the session ended, she lingered in the hallway, deep in thought. She'd worked in security for years. But this was the first time she was really questioning how she approached the job. How many times had she made quick judgments without realizing it? How often had she let silent biases shape the way she treated people? Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message lit up the screen. "Malik. Hey Sarah. I'm heading to the mall tomorrow. Thought we could talk if you're free." She hesitated for a second, then typed back, "Sarah, yeah. I'll be there. Let's talk." The next day, Malik walked through the mall slowly. Every step felt heavier than usual, but he kept going. He knew this place like the back of his hand. His family had helped build it into what it was, invested time, money, and years into making it a thriving community space. But now, the mall didn't feel the same. Gone were the carefree hangouts and casual visits. Now, he walked through it with new eyes, aware of everything in a different way. Met Sarah near the security office, the same place where everything had started. She was already there, waiting, looking a little nervous but standing tall. Malik could tell, this had changed her too. "Hey," Sarah said, offering a small, uneasy smile. "Thanks for coming." Malik nodded. "No problem." They stood there in silence for a few moments, the tension of their shared history hanging between them. Then Sarah spoke, her voice steady but soft. "I just wanted to apologize again, for everything. I should have stepped in sooner. I saw what was happening, but I froze." I let Ethan take it too far. Malik looked at her carefully, listening. He could see the regret in her face. It wasn't easy to admit when you messed up, especially something this serious, and yet, here she was, owning up to it. I get it, Malik said at last. Speaking up isn't easy, especially when it's someone you've worked with. But I'm glad you did. That took courage. Sarah gave a small nod, and you could almost see the weight lift off her shoulders. Thanks. And I'm really glad you're okay. These past few days, I've been doing a lot of thinking. This whole situation, it's shown me how much more I need to understand. Malik gave a faint smile. Yeah. I think it's been an eye-opener for a lot of people. They continued talking for a while, trading thoughts about the changes already happening at the mall and the bigger conversations around racial profiling and discrimination that were now taking place. Malik talked about his plans to stay involved in the community, to use his experience to bring awareness and push for real change. Sarah listened closely and didn't hesitate to offer her support. Whatever you need, she told him, I'm here. Count me in. As they said goodbye, Malik walked away feeling something he hadn't felt in a while, a sense of closure. He knew the work wasn't over. There was still more to do, at the mall, in the neighborhood, and even within himself. But for the first time since that awful day, he felt a bit of hope. Maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all of this. Months passed. The Richmond Mall wasn't the same place anymore. New rules were in place. The entire security team had gone through updated hands-on training focused on recognizing bias, handling situations fairly, and treating every shopper with respect. Mall leadership had made it clear they were serious about creating a welcoming, safe space for everyone. What happened to Malik wasn't going to be swept under the rug, and it wasn't going to be repeated. Meanwhile, Malik had become a well-known voice in the community. He visited schools and spoke at local events, sharing what had happened and why it mattered. His story sparked something. It gave people the courage to speak up about their own experiences. And the more people talked, the more others listened. Sarah was still working at the mall, but she wasn't the same person either. Her whole approach had shifted. She no longer saw her role as just enforcing rules. Now, she focused on protecting people, all people, with fairness and dignity. She had learned that being a good security officer wasn't about power, it was about trust. As for Ethan, he had faded from public view. The last Malik heard, Ethan had left Richmond and was struggling to find work after what happened. Malik didn't feel any satisfaction in that. He wasn't looking for revenge. But he also understood, choices have consequences. Ethan's actions had caught up with him. His career had ended, but for Malik, this was just the beginning of something bigger, and in the end, justice had been served. Not only for Malik, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly simply because of the color of their skin. There was still a long road ahead. But Malik was ready to walk it. He had found strength in truth, supporting community, and purpose in the pain he'd experienced. Because now, he knew, change was possible. And the things that connect us, compassion, respect, humanity, are stronger than the forces that try to tear us apart.